am especially, we're recording. I'm especially just excited to have you all today to sort of soft launch an initiative that's very near and dear to my heart. It's Network, stands for National Equity Together Takes Work. And so without further ado, I would actually like to introduce our president, Ashley Northcutt. So I'll let her take it away.
Hey everybody, welcome to the party. We're really excited to have you. Thanks for taking your time out of your day to share your energy with us. First of all, I'd love to thank the people from the Army that have joined our call for their service to this country. We all just observed a really key day, and we cannot imagine what you go through if we have not served in the Army, but we do appreciate everything you all do, and for taking time out of your jobs to come share the amazing changes you made with the government. Thank you all again for your time and energy. We're really excited about a lively discussion, so feel free to throw words in the chat, to raise your hand, to save questions to the end. We try at WAN to focus everything on the positive. You get a much better response if you focus on the positive sides of the change rather than pointing out potential negatives that everyone's experienced. So please keep that in mind as we're walking through this. We're going to keep this positive. We're very grateful to all of our sponsors who believe in our mission and walk alongside us as we work to empower women and focus on equality for all in the workplace. I'm going to throw out some of these names because they allow us to do what we're doing today. So Dominium, Tidwell Group, CREA, Barnes & Thornburg, Impressant, Redstone, R4, Ulysses, Highmark, Sinair, Collaborative Housing Solutions, and Marcus & Milchap. Thank you so much for all you do to allow us to host panels like this. We've had a really exciting year at WAN. In 2021, the board who is on here, Millie, Angie, Sadie, myself, and Julia, spent every week together coming up with a curriculum to launch new chapters. So we're happy to report we will launch 10 to 15 new chapters across the country this year. We hosted a Black developers panel in February. That was amazing to figure out what large companies are doing to support more diverse developers in our space. We are hosting a policy call July 20th. That's going to focus around interest and the finance gap for affordable housing projects currently under construction. We're excited to have some of the state representatives join us and explain what each state is doing to help and how to get access to that money for deals in construction so we can continue to finance for low-income housing tenants. We are working on kicking off an education series, how to access that money if you are a minority-owned company that's out there in our world. Also, we will be launching a community service initiative nationwide later this year that we're excited about. Today, our most exciting topic is Network. Network stands for National Equity Together Takes Work. This is the brainchild of Millie Hurt, who is our moderator today. It's going to be a series of panels and classes held by a well-respected consultant on how can companies make the easy changes. Sometimes when you hear a feminist viewpoint or something that focuses around women's issues, there's an immediate, like a pause, like, hold on, Millie said it earlier, I'm not ready for this yet. What we're interested in doing is talking about the positives and maybe start with the low-hanging fruit. What are some little things companies can do that can then propel to a more diverse and equitable workforce? It's important, we like to point out too, we're not focused only on females. Today, you're going to hear from the Army about parental leave for men who experience loss with their spouse or significant other during pregnancy. So we're not only focused on equality for women, but for all, because we think that's the best. So I'm very excited to hand this over to Millie. And I just want to thank again the people I get to work alongside every day that keep us positive, keep us focused on all the changes that we've already been able to make and will make in the upcoming years. So I'm just going to name them again. Nina's on here, Angie, Millie, Julia, Sadie, Emily Kotick is not on here, and Katessa. Those are the women that I am surrounded by and honored to work alongside to bring things like this to this group. So thank you, and please feel free to reach out during this and keep it lively.
Thank you, Ashley. And as you heard, we have a lot of exciting things going on. So a little bit more about Network. Network has sort of like three pillars to it. One is trying to bring about equal pay in our industry. And we know we have a big industry. It is all different sectors combined into the thing we call it affordable housing. But equal pay is one of the big pillars. Parental leave, actually, and as Ashley noted, that's not just a women's issue. That's actually in a lot of cases, we find that men are actually more discriminated in that realm. And so again, it's not equitable. And so that is something that I think that we can strive for. And then lastly, well, sort of dual is obviously looking at the DE&I component and building out, more equitable roles and in the opportunity gap. So those are kind of the main three pillars. We decided to start with parental leave, one, because it's right around Mother's Day. And actually we chose June 1st because it was smack dab between Mother's Day and Father's Day. So here we are today to talk about sort of what should the gold standard of parental leave be for our industry? What are other industries doing, such as the US Army? And what more can be done, but then how if there are wins out there, how did they get there? Let's celebrate those wins. Let's take that low-hanging fruit, as Ashley mentioned, and sort of be the squeaky wheel in our own organizations. And throughout this industry, we will have a tremendous ripple effect. And I think we have a great example. One of our speakers here today was able to take sort of that personal mission as well. So I think that you guys are going to love hearing about what can be done. As in affordable housing, we know what we're focused on. We're focused on units, providing more affordable housing. But sometimes we have to look inside and we have to start at home. And I feel like maybe we can't solve all of the world's affordable housing problems, but these are certainly things, updating parental leave policies for our own employees, I think that we can solve. And I hope that you agree with me. And I hope that you sort of join in and feel inspired to go back to your own companies or just have these conversations more broadly. Because it really just takes one person. And I hope that you all realize that. And Dominique, you're going to have to read the quote for them at some point because it's she and I have a mutual quote that inspires us every day. But before we jump in, I would like to just formally sort of introduce our panel, which is amazing. We have here today to talk to you all, Ms. Dominique Dove, CPT and JA. And I don't know all of my Army stuff, so you might have to fill some of those blanks in, but she's the administrative law attorney, 3rd Infantry Division of the US Army. So welcome so much. We have Lieutenant Colonel Kelly Bell. She's the 7203rd Medical Support Unit in the United States Army Reserve. So ladies, thank you so much for being here and able to tell your story today. From our side, on the affordable housing side, we have Kathleen Day, Senior Project Manager for the Preservation of Affordable Housing, otherwise known as POA. We have Ms. Carrie Patton, Director of Human Resources for Winthrop and Weinstein, if I didn't say that correctly, apologies. And Angie Truitt, JD, Executive Partner, Director of Compliance, People and Communications for Joseph Chris Partners. So we have sort of an interesting lineup of all different sides. And I think you're gonna learn a lot and hopefully enjoy it. So to get us started, I will go around the horn here to our speakers. If you could just take a few seconds, tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and then give me one word that you think describes parental leave policies, either in the US or in our industry. So just one word that you think summarizes the current state of parental leave. And I'll start with Lieutenant Colonel Kelly Bell.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I have 2 daughters, a 6.5-year-old and a 10-year-old. I'm been in the Army Reserve for 23 years now. And if I could use one word to describe parental leave policies today, I would definitely use the word evolving.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good. Kathleen, I see you next.
Hi, I'm Kathleen. I'm here in Chicago. I work for Preservation of Affordable Housing, also known as POA, as Millie said, which just rolled out a brand new, wonderful parental leave policy that I'll be super happy to talk about a little bit later. I'm a mother of two. I have a 5.5-year-old and a 2-year-old COVID baby. My one word for parental leave in the US is patchwork.
Carrie, you're up next.
Hello, everybody. My name is Carrie Patton. As previously introduced, I work in human resources. I've done that my entire career. I currently work for a law firm, and I have 3 kids. My baby is graduating from high school. She's my last one. I'm proud to announce that tomorrow I will be making my last lunch. For those of you working moms, that if any of you, that's your bane of existence, I will be making my last lunch. So it's a bittersweet week for me. And I would say my word to describe parental leave here in our country is interesting.
Dominique?
Hi, I'm Dominique Dove, a captain in the United States Army, and I'm an administrative law attorney. I have a soon-to-be 3-year-old daughter. She turns 3 June 20th, and she's my inspiration for everything that I do in life. And I know we're supposed to be positive, but this is going to be my one little plug. I think my one word for parental leave in the United States is inadequate.
Yes, you're not wrong. Angie.
Hi, y'all. Angie Truitt, recovering attorney turned recruiter, and I focus in real estate development and construction, specifically niched in affordable housing. So I work with a lot of folks that do what you guys do every day, and I'm not smart enough to understand all of it, but I love that you guys have let me play in your sandbox. And my word, I'm a mother of one. She's 20, so I stopped making lunches a long time ago, thankfully, but she's still quite expensive because I seem to DoorDash food to her and Instacart food to her all the time in college. I also have 5 rescue dogs now since I have no kid to dote on. And my word is improving for the state of parental leave in the U.S.
Great. Well, thank you for those quick introductions.
Millie, real quick, Kathleen, what was your word?
Patchwork.
Patchwork. All right.
And I'll give my word, and it's a kind of like following Dom. Antiquated. That's going to be my word. So I feel like a lot of times like the 1960s or 80s called and they just like want everybody's policies back. Like, so I know I'm cheesy also. So let's get started because I think we want to hear about like definitely Dominique and Kelly. We are so excited. We were so excited. Like we freaked out when we saw the announcement about the US Army and how you'd be changing the postpartum leave policies. So as soldiers and as a lawyer and as a nurse and moms, can you tell us how that felt? I mean, that was probably super. I know it wasn't unexpected because you were working on it, but were you just like, really? Did that happen? Tell us how you felt. I know, Kelly, I see you. You're on mute though.
I'm at work, so they had a big like alarm that went off. So I was like, oh, I gotta mute. I think surreal is an understatement. I mean, even though we had put together our proposal and we've been working on it it was almost exactly a year that we were working on the policy. It was like, I didn't really think it was going to happen until I watched. And thankfully, like I was lucky enough to be there in person to watch the Secretary of the Army actually sign the memo because there were so many players in it. When you think of any big organization, you've got personnel, we have medical in the military, you know, the legal aspect of it. And then you have leaders that have to say yes to it. And so there are all these players that at any point during the process, it could have been stopped and been like, nope, we're not gonna, you know, keep going with this, or we're gonna take all this out or whatever. And so we kept waiting for that day that it was actually signed, and Dom got to go in via like video, you know, so it was a pretty big event to have the Secretary of the Army sign it and get it out there. And then to see all of the positive comments coming back in, the soldiers that it's helping, not just women, so we'll use the gender neutral term of soldiers. So it's pretty exciting.
I just got goosebumps. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but that is amazing. And Dominique or Dom, do you like to be called? Sorry.
Both is fine.
Okay.
I did see a question in the chat that asked what the new policy is.
Yeah, if you could talk about that. That would be wonderful.
So I'll talk about it a little. So I'll say how I got started. I had my daughter and I was having a semi-crisis because I was breastfeeding and I had to go to the field. And I remember just reaching out to multiple Facebook groups, and mom, as I call her, Kelly.
Mom.
Kelly was the first person that responded to me and was like, no, this is what this means. And it was a policy that we have that had just got implemented that said, after birth, you were excused from deployments for up to a year, which is a really big deal. But the intent was to include you from like being away from the baby, but it wasn't written that way. So people were just interpreted as deployments. And I had a field training exercise and I'm like, I pump every 2 hours. My baby needs my milk. So I was freaking out. And so that's how I got started meeting Kelly. And then we started making different policy updates. So there's 18 policies that have been implemented. And there's so many things, like there's reservists now can get paid for maternity leave. Before this policy, there was no maternity leave at all for reservists. There are things like you and your spouse won't be, you're non-deployable if you're going through fertility treatments. There's height, weight. So we have a certain standard that we have to have and be in compliance. So we have up to 12 months now after having a baby to get into compliance for height, weight, and for our PT test. We're allowed to wear a maternity uniform for up to a year, to give our body time to recover. There's a lot more. I can't get in depth. Kelly, if you want, you can add some more on those. But those were the ones that like really, and then in addition, the operational deployment, deferment for deployment, it now includes any like overnight duty. So the mother can stay home with their baby or close to their baby and be able to pump their milk or breastfeed, and you don't have to separate the mother and the father, the mother and the baby. And it's beneficial for women, but it's also very beneficial for men because men now can have more time with their families. They're not stressed about their spouses, and they can stay home. Like if they're getting fertility treatment, you need both people there for that. And so now they can be. Sorry, that took a little long, but
no, it is because it's a lot, and it's totally amazing that you helped. I just can't even think of the thousands and thousands, tens and maybe even hundreds of thousands.
140,000 parents.
100 and how many?
140,000 parents.
Oh, just a few.
Yep. So the Army directive itself is basically 12 policy updates just in one document. So there were other policy updates that Dom is talking about that happened prior to this that we worked on that they were already policy. And so, but this document combined several different policies, and it created new policies and it updated current policies. And one of the things that we really worked hard on throughout the policy is that it is a parenthood policy. So it's not just a pregnancy and postpartum policy. It's not just for female soldiers. And it recognizes that even what a family looks like is also evolving and doesn't mean the same to everyone. So you have single parents out there, you have same gender families out there, you have birth parents and non-birth parents, you have adoptive parents, you have parents that become long-term foster care parents. And so this policy incorporates all of those basically all parents into the policy, recognizing that it's not just, a male and a female and a couple of kids. That's, yes, that's out there, but you have a lot of different pictures of what a family looks like. So, for example, the operational deferment is extended also to the non-birth parent and it's for adoption and foster care placement, as well as actual childbirth. So the idea is to keep at least one, if not both of those parents at home with the new child for that first 12 months of life. And that's dual purpose. One is for the birth parent, that's potentially breastfeeding. It allows her to continue to breastfeed actually up to 2 years. It's extended if you're still lactating up to 2 years. And then for the other parent, it keeps them at home, and that helps with the infant bonding of young children as well. So it was really exciting to be able to work on this really inclusive policy. I know you had mentioned the pregnancy loss. So prior to this policy coming out, even for the person that physically experiences a pregnancy loss, to include stillborn, there was no true leave for that person. Maybe they would get some convalescent leave, which is like the military sick time, but it was commander's discretion. And there was absolutely nothing for the other parent. So this policy is completely groundbreaking and totally exciting because it mandates, based on how far along that pregnancy was, it specifies time off. And it's not just for the person that physically experiences the loss, it's for the spouse. Right now, it's not the significant other. They have to be married because of the way our leave system works. But it recognizes that the spouse is also going through some emotional problems because of the loss. And so this mandates that the spouse also gets time off to emotionally heal themselves and then also support the person that physically went through the loss. So both of the people that are involved in a pregnancy loss are mandated time off now for emotional and physical healing, which is amazing.
I feel like we need to do a collective round of applause or something. Like, this is just amazing. It's just incredible.
I know. Thank you. I mean, to hear about just the breadth of these policies, that just the holistic, the families, all the different things that were considered. You said it took a year, and there were multiple. It could have been knocked down so many times, and so I think that if you guys can do it, that's why I was like, we can do it. We
Absolutely.
can do it at our individual companies. We could do it for our industry. There is, and I'm going to just throw it out there. I think the U.S. Army has always been kind of male dominated. So I think so is our industry, though. So we have that in common for sure.
So in the Army, females only make up 18% of the force. But we also obviously have a lot of parents, which is why, this policy was important, because the Army recognizes that behind every soldier, there is a family. That's kind of a common saying. And this policy is really taking that mentality and putting it at the forefront. Because if you have a soldier that you want readily deployable and in the game, and a lot of that's in the mental game, right? You have to be mentally in the game, in the fight, that takes your whole family. And so when you have policies like this now, that that your family is taken care of, that just makes you as a soldier more fit to fight.
Wow.
Can I ask a quick question? Of the 18% of females, how many are in decision-making positions? Right? So you guys made the male.
Yeah,
it's a huge movement.
So
yes,
it's small.
Very small. And one thing I will say too, just so everyone knows, that we were just a group of moms. We aren't, and I'm currently an administrative law attorney. I was HR before this. So none of us were in a position where we could be like, oh yeah, let's get this implemented. We were just a group of moms that had concerns or improvements and suggestions from other moms, and we got together and did it. So it's definitely surreal.
It's doable.
Right. I
It's
mean,
not
none of
surreal,
us
it's doable.
we're in those authority positions to make the decisions. We just came together, like Dom said. So we had put out like an informal survey. We used, I don't know if we used Google or SurveyMonkey, something along those lines. And we asked on a couple different social media platforms, like, what if you could change one policy, what policy would you change? And so we took like the top 5, and then we took it a step further. Instead of just saying, okay, these are the top 5 issues, fix them, we said, okay, these are the top 5 issues, but we also did the work behind it. So we, for each issue, we said, this is the issue, this is why it's an issue, this is how we want it changed. So we kind of started to rewrite the policy for the policy writers, because we are not policy, well, we are now, but we were not. I'll just say that. We definitely were not policy writers. And then we backed it up with the research. So for example, the deferments in terms of, okay, what are the recommendations for continuing to breastfeed your child? Okay, so now it was okay, exclusive for 6 months, then it was up to a year. Now they recommend even up to 2 years, if not longer. The bonding research that we put in there, so we put together basically a formal paper and submitted it, not just, okay, we want these things changed.
Right.
We did the work behind it, which I think from the feedback that we got, that was the key component to how we were able to get it into the hands of a lot of the senior leaders, because we did the work and they were like, wow, there's a lot of good information here. And I do want to give a plug to the senior leaders, because we do hear a lot of times the negative, but they were really interested to hear what the issues were. And a lot of the feedback we got initially was not, like a lot of people were like, oh, they don't care. Well, no, actually they do care. They just didn't know that some of these things were happening, or, a lot of times it comes down to semantics where, the way a policy is written, but you're up here writing a policy, and I'm sure we see it, across, corporate America too. HR writes this policy up here, but then, the lower end user, how is that get all the way down to, and how does the end user use that? And so they didn't know that a lot of these things were issues, because they're not at the end user level. And so they said, they were like, wow, we didn't know these were problems and we want to fix them.
Those are all great points. I was taking some notes. So surveying sort of what do people want changed, actually putting the recommendations and the research behind it. Kathleen, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit over to you, because I think you might have done something like this in an affordable at POA. So can you tell us about, what you did and how you went about it?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So POA is a national organization. We're based in Boston. We've got 60 employees on the real estate development side. We're nonprofit. And then we also have this property management company that employs hundreds of people. We're in 11 states. We're in Washington, D.C. So the reason I used the word patchwork earlier is that before January 1st, 2022, if you or your partner had a baby, what you could benefit from was all over the map, depending on, Massachusetts has a 12-week paid leave policy that's capped at $750 a week, but Illinois does not. So like at best, you're in a jurisdiction where you'll be supported by the state through some payroll benefit, and you'll get part of your pay that way, or you could get part of your pay that way. And at worst, you're in a jurisdiction that doesn't have that, and you get 2 weeks off. The way I think of it is you get 2 weeks off unless you bring your own resources to the table. One of the things when I was deep into this after I had my son, and I was frankly on a rampage and trying to channel that energy into something productive, I found that there's a lot of double speak around parental leave. I hear things like offering FMLA, which is a law that you follow. It's not a benefit. Or, well, people can take up to 12 weeks. Yeah, but if it's not paid, then what is that really offering, you know? So personally, in 2020, I had my second kid. I returned to work at 6 weeks because all that I could access in terms of paid time off was through short-term disability, 6 weeks. And I'm the sole breadwinner of my family, so I wasn't gonna leave money on the table to take unpaid time off. And, you know, I worked in the development space. Those of you who are developers, you know that unlike in the, you know, syndicators or lending or even the agencies, you're not closing 20 deals a year, right? So I had an opportunity to close a deal, and that's how we notch our belts, right? So I'll be damned if I'm going to take a pay cut and also, you know, leave on the table this opportunity to professionally advance. So I came back to work, and it was a hell ride, and I'll just leave it at that for now because we're trying to keep things positive. But after I closed the deal, I took a day off per week for about a quarter, and I spent a lot of that time thinking, reading, writing, talking to a lot of people on the phone, calling around my colleagues, both my colleagues generally in affordable housing and my colleagues at COA, to kind of take the temperature, sort of my version of the survey that Kelly and Dominique described to get a sense of like, how do people feel about this? We had a baby boom among the men on the real estate side of things. So ultimately, a few months later, I submitted a letter to POA leadership, to our president, Aaron Gorenstein. And to my surprise and delight, they took it seriously. And about 6 months later, I'm telling the abridged version here, by the way, because there are many, many conversations that happened along the way. Haley, who's from POA and POA Communities HR, is on this call too, and her support was invaluable. Anyway, to make a long story short, I submitted a 2-page letter, and 6 months later, got an announcement from Aaron Gorenstein announcing that both POA Inc. and POA Communities was now effective January 1st, 2022, offering a parental leave policy that was almost exactly what I had argued was what we should offer, which is 12 weeks, almost entirely paid, offered to both birthing and non-birthing parents. And it's like one of the happiest moments of my life. Yeah, without any exaggeration. I could say more, I'll leave it at that for now, but I'm happy to answer questions about that or opine because I've, you know.
Well, tell
like to talk
us a
about
little
this.
bit, like in your letter, I'm sure you had probably you brought what you had learned from your colleagues, and you probably brought some recommendations, maybe even some, like what all was in this letter that we should know, you know, because it sounds like it's a good format. It worked.
At first, the letter was about 7 pages long and lots of feelings, things very personal to me and the stuff that I had gone through when I was in postpartum, trying to return to work on 0 sleep with the baby that had been in the NICU, yada, yada, yada. You know, I say that these phone calls with colleagues were invaluable in this process. And one of them was, I was in close communication with our chief of staff, whose wife had just had their 3rd baby. And he told me, if you want to convince Aaron, this needs to be shorter. It needs to be less personal. So that's how it got boiled down. The letter was essentially, we are at a time when it's become difficult to hide just how much is involved, how many resources are needed to support families. You know, the things that they used to be behind closed doors or outsourced to a daycare were really blown wide open during COVID. And there was just, as we know, there's been this reckoning, this sort of bringing out into the open the absolute desperation of even comfortable middle-class families, to say nothing of people who have even fewer resources than that, right? It's like we're in this moment. I also started by explaining what our policy was, because I can say with absolute certainty that unless your leadership of your employer is actively involved in an effort to improve the parental leave plan, I guarantee They have no idea what is being offered. To speak to this point that I think Kelly made, that it's not that people in positions of power or authority don't care, but parenthood and particularly motherhood is something that is by design kept under wraps. And I will also add that POA was founded 20 years ago by a woman who really resisted the first time my colleagues, who are now senior female colleagues, went to leadership, meaning her, and asked for parental leave where there was none at all. And that's how we got what I had, which was the 6 weeks short-term disability on the real estate side of things. But so anyway, so that's the starting point. Here's what we have, and it's a patchwork. I have a graphic too, because it is frankly very confusing. What it should be is this. It should be 12 weeks, representing the fourth trimester. It should never be anything less than 12 weeks. It should be fully paid, because what are you offering if it's not fully paid? Some of us are the sole breadwinners of our family, and you're asking us to leave money on the table, and I don't think that really makes any sense when you think about it. And also, I didn't put this in the letter, in terms of dollars, it's just not that much. So I think sometimes there's a symbolic docking of like, okay, well, we'll only pay you 80% of your pay. It's like, great. So you will save a couple $100 and I will have difficulty making ends meet while I'm growing my family. And then number three, it should be extended to.
And building resentment
What's
for
that?
the company. Everybody shake their
Right.
head.
Well, trying to keep things positive here, Millie, but yeah, right. It's just, the point is that it doesn't cost that much, and this is ultimately a very short period in people's lives. It's a very intense period. People have just experienced something cataclysmic, whether it's the first time they're growing their family or subsequent growth of their family. The third point that I made was that it needed to be extended to both birthing and non-birthing parents. There is the point that Kelly and Dominique brought up, that is, otherwise you're completely excluding foster parents, adoptive parents, same-sex parents. And also, if I'm a man and I have the opportunity to take leave or not, like the calculation is complex. As I said for myself, I didn't want to pack up an opportunity to grow professionally. And particularly if I'm a man, like why would I, if my employer is giving me if the offer is, well, I guess we will allow you to take time off unpaid if you really want it. Like, or you could just stay at work and continue working, and you're closing deals, you're making inroads in your career while your colleague over there is at home. Like that's also part of the story about equity here. To say nothing of the fact that when you don't offer paid parental leave to fathers, you're disrespecting the role of fathers, other parents, non-birthing parents, I think you understand what I mean, that they have in raising their families. And when we're talking about the motherhood penalty, the pay gap, a lot of this feeds directly into that. So for me, the stakes are high. The last thing I'll say about this for now, unless you have questions, is that I did this after my second kid. I have no intention of having any other kids. And I had been at POA at the time for over 6 years. I had no intention of ever asking for anything for myself. And I had a searing rage that I really needed to channel someplace. And I'm really happy that I did it. And the outcome is fantastic. And today is a very auspicious day because the first colleague that I know of who's benefiting from the new policy is an assistant property manager, soon to be property manager, right here where I'm at one of our properties. It's under construction, and today is her first day back from maternity leave. But I'm thrilled, but it's also, it makes me think a lot about, like, I was prepared to spend a lot of political capital to fight this fight. And thankfully, our leadership was very receptive, and they took it very seriously. But I think when you are contemplating going on parental leave, especially the first time, you're in such an acute state of vulnerability. I mean, it took me weeks to psych up the courage to even tell my boss that I was pregnant the first time, because we swim in this environment that we're still getting these echoes of an earlier generation of women's leadership and a brand of feminism that says, shh, be quiet. You don't pretend like you don't have any particular needs. Don't make us think. But that is extremely harmful.
Well, Kathleen, I can relate to everything that you've said. I actually had a COVID baby as well, getting ready to turn 2. And I took 8 weeks, and that was with a C-section. And I will tell you, the other thing that really comes to mind for me is I was able to breastfeed for the entire time because we were stuck at home. Had that not been a global pandemic going on out in the world, then it would be a much different, and I'm not sure that if there is a second time around, it would be very, very difficult to hand over a newborn to a complete stranger. So, there's a lot to unwrap there. But I think what you said is sometimes when we want change, we do have to back up. We do have to take, a less personal, a less emotional, even though I think emotions are not weakness, they are completeness. That's my own personal saying and belief. But in order to affect change, we have to be able to penetrate and not, well, they'll shut down on us is all I can say, is if we take it to a too personal of a level. Carrie, I wanted to flip over to you. From the HR perspective, and I know that you work for Winthrop and Weinstein, which is a law firm, but you all specialize in LIHTC. What are you seeing in the legal field? And then, maybe can you talk a little bit about the HR, like what do we have to do? We've talked a little bit about FMLA, but break it down for us so that we get it. And then I would love, because I think the attorneys are actually like winning at this, if there is such a thing as winning. I've heard some like 4 months leave kind of from some of my attorney friends. So break it down for us, please.
Well, it's interesting, and I found it nice to hear that some of my fellow panelists also come from with JD background, so you can hopefully agree to some of this. But I've been in the human resources profession most of my 25-year career, but I'm actually newer to the legal profession. I worked most of my career in the commercial real estate industry, but I've been with the legal profession for about 3 years now. So I'm new to Winthrop and Weinstein. And I remember when I started with Winthrop and Weinstein, and my colleagues and friends would say, why does a law firm need an HR person? That just seems like such an oxymoron. Don't they? Why do they need an HR person? And I would tease the attorneys when I got here, and I would say, you guys don't know what you're doing, like from HR side. So it's kind of vindicating. But I will say, in the legal community, what was really spurring a lot of the need to drive the parental leave was a lot of what, like Kathleen was saying. It was to even the playing field between men and women attorneys. So when you think of new attorneys entering the field of law, they come out of law school in a law firm world, and they have a certain runway, if you will, to operate as a young emerging attorney before they make a shareholder or partner in a law firm. And it's 7 years, 10 years, whatever the case may be, in a new law firm. And that is people typically in their 20s, 30s, typically people in the prime part of their life where they're growing their family, where women are having babies and going out on their maternity leave as well. The women are in some kind of way being perceived as taking a step back because they have to take that time off, where the men don't necessarily have to take that time off. So it's really an interesting dynamic where the whole concept behind giving paid parental leave was somewhat to level the playing field between men and women, by not necessarily making the women take the time, but also affording the same benefit. So in some regard, it's such a strange dynamic to me that the whole benefit of paid parental leave in the world of law was somewhat intended to kind of level the playing field between the career development of attorneys between the two genders, which I find is really interesting. So that's a lot of the buzz, and I think the genesis of parental leave within the law firm world. So just a interesting kind of tidbit about that. But as organizations, as in the communities and the businesses that you all represent are looking and now inspired by what you're hearing and learning about today, want to take back and either start to implement policies in your businesses or start to have conversations about the policies in your businesses, what I would say to start with is, and hopefully my attorney friends here on the panel would agree with this statement, is that the law is the basement. I mean, the law is where we start, and we don't need our new parents or our new babies sleeping in the basement. We want to start with more than that. We heard the statement that it starts with, all the things that we already know, right? Leave under the Family Medical Leave Act, which already starts with the components of 12 weeks of leave. That's 12 weeks of unpaid leave. That's 12 weeks of assuming you meet all the other requirements of an employer that's eligible for 12 weeks, including, 100 employees within a 50 miles radius. So all the things that you even have to even qualify to have the 12 weeks. So you have to think about the things that even just are the basement of eligibility, but you have to start by thinking about what do you want to start to think about offering as a component of the culture of your business, and start by that. There's a lot to be said about benchmarking and understanding what other businesses in your industry or community are offering. That's like participating in things like this, and the things that we've heard are great ways to understand where even to start. But I also caution that that's a great place to start and start to think about, but it shouldn't be kind of the end all be all, because I get that a lot in my industry. Well, what are other firms doing? What are our competitors doing? Which is a good place to start, but it shouldn't be your end all be all. Because I always say, well, what do we want to do? It's great to know what everybody else is doing, but what do we want to do? And let's remember, the law is the basement, and we don't want our new babies and our new parents sleeping in the basement.
Yes. Well, I think that that's a great point. And I'm so glad that you pointed out that this is a great forum, because that is actually what Network is going to be all about. It is creating these spaces, as we are here today, to talk about these things in a more free manner. I mean, that we can say, okay, well, one company may be doing this or whatever, but also to talk about how are we evolving, and what should be the gold standards, and what do we want? And I think we're hearing some great examples. But then, if there are policies that need to be changed, that this can also become a platform to take those ideas, those needed policy changes, and we can elevate those in other. We have people for that can help with that, or we can start to drive those changes and those policy changes. So it's really, really exciting time, I think, and inspiring, I think, is how I feel. I'm going to switch over to Angie for a second. She's not only on our board, she's you guys should also know that anything that looks really nice, our backgrounds, any of our marketing, all of that is Angie, by the way. This is the woman that makes us look just amazing. So she is multi-talented, as you will find out. So Angie, as a recruiter in this industry, what are you seeing? How bad is it? How good is it? What's going on? And what should we be doing? So,
well, Millie, thank you for the praise. That's all Canva. I just move things around in Canva, but
not everybody's
apologies. Of course, my phone's ringing right now. But I chose the word improving for a reason. And I think, it's an interesting segue between Carrie's conversation and mine, because I practiced law for 13 years. And I can tell you guys that things have changed for the better significantly since I was approaching motherhood and had to lobby for a leave policy just for myself, not even trying to impact change like Kathleen and Kelly and Dom have, but just so that I could take time off with my own kid. And I basically had to bill all of my hours for the year so that I could take 2 months of time off. And billable hours are horrible, but try to imagine working an entire year's worth in 10 months just so that you could have two months off. That was my reality as a young parent. But then when I moved on to a new firm when my daughter was very young, and I went out to lunch with the managing partner who took all of us female associates out to lunch and then openly proclaimed to the whole group, he doesn't like to hire women because as soon as we have babies, we get lazy. So Carrie's absolutely right. Lawyers have no idea what they should be saying and shouldn't be saying, but that was something. I mean, I'm quite a bit older than most of our panelists, as being 50 years old, but that's in the very recent past, right? Where a managing partner of a law firm felt comfortable sharing that with people who were lawyers and knew that that was an illegal thing to say, right? So what we're seeing now is a significant improvement beyond what I experienced as a young mother. But in our industry, real estate development in general and affordable housing specifically, we are still quite behind the ball. There's a lot of opportunity for us to make change, and hopefully people get inspired today from hearing all these great stories about how folks have done that. I pulled some information. I think NRP Group has a really I don't want to say it's a progressive policy. I think it's a fair policy, and it's probably one of the better ones that I've seen in our industry specifically. But they have a 6-week maternity policy for the birth parent, and then 2 extra weeks for both parents, which is 8 weeks total. But they have what's called a parental bonding leave that you can take up to 1 year after birth or introduction to a child. It's available to both parents. And I couldn't gather whether it was paid or unpaid from my research, but it came as a result of one of their VPs of design and entitlements. Her name's Jennifer Bowson. She started the Women's Inclusion Network over at NRP Group. And this was kind of a brainchild of her and some of the other women that she worked with, because recognizing that, as the women with the Army, you guys are a force of nature, not just addressing time off, but to recover and things like that, but a year to spend with your child, like that's huge. And so I haven't seen that anywhere else within our industry. There's another group that's out in the San Francisco area, Bridge Housing. They have an option. It's 6 weeks, 6 weeks, and they can double that if they take it half pay. So, if you want 12 weeks, you can take 12 weeks half. I haven't really seen a lot of super generous policies in our industry on the developer side. Obviously, if you're dealing with housing authorities, if they're in one of the jurisdictions, I think there are 9 now who have either implemented paid parental leave policies or will be implementing them to become effective in 2023 and 2024. If you're, working for one of those, then you get the benefits of those policies. But in general, there's a lot of work to be done. I think in our industry specifically. You mentioned gold standard. I think the more global reach a company has, the more they're affected by parental leave policies in other countries. I mean, we know we're the only industrialized nation that doesn't have one, right? So if you're servicing clients and working with employees that are living in those countries that have that, you're going to be more apt to offer very generous policies. And so there are quite a few organizations that offer a year of paid parental leave for both parents. But you're not going to find that. I mean, that's a handful. But it's interesting, like Scentsy is one of those. Those little candle plug-in things? Scentsy offers 52 weeks paid leave. So, if you feel like jumping out of affordable housing and pushing some candles, you can have a year off to have your next kiddo. But I found that a lot of the kind of where people are settling is between the 12 and 16 week mark outside of our industry. So that has been, and then some version of that between 2 and 4 weeks for the non-birth parent. And I think that so it is improving because, 10, 20 years ago, that didn't exist, right? And then we talked, Carrie, about law firms. Obviously, the law firms that have global reach are going to have the more progressive parental leave policies as well.
Yeah.
And then a couple of things that I noticed too, Indeed and Glassdoor, if you're checking out a company and you're trying to figure out if it's a culture that you would thrive in, and they have a whole new section on parental leave policies on both websites. It's so new that there's not data yet really on the companies, but it's something that they're now asking of people who have worked at those companies to share. So that's another sign that the industry is shifting, and they want our feedback so that they can craft better and more attractive parental leave policies for potential candidates.
That's great. And we know that some of this probably boils down to dollars and cents in our industry, and in all industries, I'm sure. Can we afford to offer this? Can our property managers and maintenance staff and all of the people that make up this industry, can we afford to lose them for X amount of time? And I actually had hoped that Wallet Communities would have been joining us, and I think in a future panel we'll have them, but they had to do that, the back of the envelope and figure out, how are we going to pay for this? This isn't, when it's not that leadership doesn't want to do these things. A lot of times they have to look at the business case for it as well and come up with a plan. And so a future, I know Kathleen, you just unmuted, so a future hopefully panel discussion will be about the mechanics on maybe on the HR and the leadership level. Like, how did you figure out how to do this, and how were you able to offer this? I think they might have rolled it into their benefits plan, and I don't want to speak for them, but we are starting to see great examples, I think, in our industry, and it's very exciting. So we have to keep rolling with that. We have to look for those situations that are unequal. And I think we have to advocate for our male peers and our allies when we see those things. So even if your company is not willing to go to 12 weeks fully paid for everybody, can you get it so that at least there's no definition of primary versus non-primary or birth versus non-birth? Can we advocate for things like additional days for bereavement, for miscarriage or loss of pregnancy for both sides? These are things that we just have to become squeaky wheels, quite frankly, not emotional raging ball, which I can be, but like squeaky wheel. Carrie, I'm sure my poor HR person, she's like, not you again, what do you want? But have these conversations. I think that's my personal, I know I'm not actually a panelist, but you have the potential. Each and every one of us here today has the potential to affect change. Kathleen, did you want
Yes, I'm over here. If I could just speak to the cost, like I said in the chat, I never engaged directly with our senior leadership on the cost of this, but here's my theory. I don't think this is about cost at all. I think that when you look at this, I think the price tag is not at all what people imagine it to be. And I think what is needed is just attention to the issue. I think that our parental leave policies, or lack thereof, is driven by a set of assumptions that are not really based in reality and have a lot to do with how indulgent we think that parental leave is. Not to nitpick, but I think this is a really excellent example. So Poland's current policy, which is I'm again very happy about, is 12 weeks. It's 8 weeks fully paid, and then the last 4 weeks are partially paid. And in my humble opinion, this is just a vestige of this outdated attitude that if we dig the surface, it's an assumption that you need to crack the whip so that people will go back to work. The underlying assumption is that parental leave is a vacation, which everybody on this call knows it is not. So when people say we can't afford it, I want to ask this: can you afford it if an employee of yours were to have an accident, get hit by a bus, and was in the hospital for 12 weeks? You would figure it out. The difference here is that you plan for parental leave. So, I mean, shit happens when you have employees and you have humans. They may be gone. You need to deal with this. This needs to be seen as just like a baseline cost of running a business. And I suspect that cost is not that high.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Lieutenant Colonel, did you have anything to add?
I did. So in the military, when we think of cost, we look at not just obviously the financial cost of like in the corporate sector of paying someone while they're on leave, because ours is also like you keep getting a paycheck. But we also look at in terms of readiness, because the mission obviously as the military is to go to war. That's our mission. And so we look at it as readiness, and a big component of readiness is medical readiness. And so when you think of what does it cost to give a soldier this time off, in the end, it's actually a cost savings, because we're increasing and we're maintaining, and a lot of it's preventative in terms of medical complications. So a lot of the policy updates that we have now been implemented actually prevents other complications that would then cause that soldier to be non-deployable for even an extended period of time. So we've done a lot of looking at the current research in terms of physical healing from being pregnant and childbirth, which is why our body composition standards have been pushed out. Our physical testing standards are pushed out to give that soldier time to physically heal before they're going right into, oh my gosh, I have to be at my pre-pregnancy weight, or I have to be at my pre-pregnancy fitness level, which then causes medical complications that then creates a soldier that is non-deployable for an even longer period of time, because they have complications now because they've either tried dieting, or they're trying to lift weights and they have pelvic floor injuries, or whatever the case might be. And so really that cost savings is a long-term cost savings. And it also allowing that parent, or at least one parent, to be home, it eases the burden on that. A lot of times the birth mother, with decreases postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. Of course, the research is out there about breastfeeding. So, there's a lot of benefits for mom and baby in terms of extended breastfeeding. When you look at, that child has less infections, they're not sick as much, which means that that parent isn't taking off time to work because that child can't be in daycare, for example. So it's hard to put an actual number, but it's actually a cost savings when you have a lot of these policies in place that allow that flexibility and the physical healing of the birth parents as well.
Thank you for all of those points. And that's so true. The development of the children and just the family dynamic it's priceless, really, right? I mean, you can't put a price around that. I think the one thing that we haven't really talked about, but I want to touch on, is just the attrition. We're seeing women leave our industry at critical points, maybe resentfully as well. We are, and I'm sure that has been something that the Army has probably taken note. Like, if you're not going to be supportive, then they're going to go somewhere else. And so, and so I don't know, Angie, are you seeing the Great Resignation? How much of that would you say might have had something to do with, the people are having to go back to the office now, and they've come off of this ability to be flexible and be home with their families, or maybe breastfeed in my case,
Yeah, that's 100% it. I've got clients who are still struggling with the new reality. If you can do your job successfully from home, just let your employees stay home and do their jobs there. And I still have clients digging in saying, I really want these people in the office. So say, okay, well, it's going to take me a lot longer to find those people, because everybody is really enjoying the extra time home with family and being able to not waste time in a commute and, things like that, but just how much it's affected our ability to be there for our families, especially when, those of us with school age children who were also struggling to deal with remote learning, that possibility didn't even exist pre-COVID for all of us to be able to be there and support in all those different ways. And so absolutely, if companies are not willing to be flexible with a work from home environment, they are losing people. Like it's just the reality now.
Well, I hope that also going forward, if they're not offering, at least a base, not a basement level, but a good base level, parental leave policy that they get left in the dust, See ya. Not competitive anymore. So I'm going to open it up for questions and answers. I'm going to pitch it over to Nina, who is going to kind of lead us through some of the maybe stuff in the chat, or if you have a burning question, turn your video on, raise your hand, unmute yourself. This has been spectacular. So what do we got, Nina?
I think most of the comments are just, they've been discussions ongoing as everyone's been chiming in. So I don't see any burning questions. An interesting comment though, Kristen noted that her boss called her 6-week leave a vacation, which I think is probably a common theme we've all heard. I like that. So does anyone have any questions? They just want to raise their hand. We can unmute you or pose a question in the chat. We'd be happy to answer them. We have about 5 minutes left.
Julia.
Nina, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So, hi guys, I'm Julia. I'm from Indiana. I run the Indiana chapter, but I'm also the treasurer on the national board. One of the things that I notice is even when we do get the time off, how do we stop working? How do we set that precedent for the women that come behind us to say, do not open your computer? The world will go on, but we just need to make sure that how do we set that precedent and tell people that it is okay to take that time? Like Miss Millie is currently on a vacation day. How do we teach ourselves and teach our next generation to take that time for yourself to be with your child?
So I'm super OCD. Like I'm a 0 email read kind of person. So that was like maternity leave, 8 weeks off was very, very difficult. So I'm just going to give my personal plug. What I did, because I would have gone crazy if I knew that there were unread emails. One, I disconnected it from my phone. So I wasn't getting it to my phone. I occasionally logged in and I just deleted all the junk mail so that I didn't feel as though like I was coming back to thousands. So anything that was junk, I just deleted. Otherwise it just kind of left unread. But that was my way of sort of balancing my OCD with my trying to unplug. So.
And I see a lot too with clients promoting their very generous leave policies in PTO, not just specifically related to parental leave. But what I'll hear from a lot of people is, well, I'm not really given time off. I'm expected to check email. I'm expected to text. And I have a client that is amazing at this. Like I was in Belize working for them while the head of HR was on leave, and she didn't answer a single question the entire time. Like I'm emailing from the beach, and she was checked out because they have from the top down a culture of your time off is your time off. We are not going to contact you unless everything's on fire. So I think that has to come from leadership. And if that's not something that you're seeing at your organizations, that's something that needs to be addressed, because what's the point of time off if you don't get time off?
Yeah. I know at one company I worked at in the past, when you were on leave, they shut down your access to the intranet and the email system. So you were actually off the system. And you couldn't,
that's awesome.
They couldn't get to you. So that was one way to kind of, I think, help with that issue where you just didn't have access and clients didn't have access to you. So
Captain, I think you went off mute for a second. Did you have something to add?
Yes, I did. I can definitely tell you what not to do, which was what I did. I was in labor for 48 hours. And so since I had a lot of free time, I kept texting and emailing. And the day that I had my baby, I remember I got an email and I was going to respond. And my husband was like, "Are you serious right now? Like, what is wrong with you?" And it was at that point, like, I realized that I needed to take that time off. And a person that I looked up to really said something that got to me, and it was, she apologized for basically like making unrealistic standards. And I realized that's what I was doing because I was a commander at the time. So I was in charge of an entire unit. And if I'm doing this as a leader, then that means all the people below me think that this is what they're supposed to do. And I'm actually giving them a disservice. And she apologized for doing that. And I realized, you know what, I'm doing the exact same thing. And so now I'm on leave. Like, don't text me, don't call me. And I mean, especially in the Army, we're made to be replaceable. Like nothing that we do is someone else can't do it for us. And if you are a leader and you are the only person that can do that, that means that you're failing as a leader. You should be able to delegate and let other people step in your place.
Thank you for sharing that. I had goosebumps too. Just you're right for sure. Well, we are almost at time, and I could keep talking all day long. Honestly, this has been fantastic, and I'm so inspired. I could cry by just what can be done. And so, Ashley, I don't know if you wanted to just send us off with some. You're very inspiring as well. So just wrap us up then.
Not compared to this. You guys, that was amazing. Like Millie kept saying it. I'm sure y'all all feel it. I had goosebumps so many times throughout that, but I just need to say yes, ma'am, to Captain Dom, because what you just said is huge. There are a lot of leaders on this call. We are the ones that are setting that tone, and we are the ones that have the ability to make the change starting now. Maybe not with policies like you all were allowed to accomplish, but showing the females that are coming up alongside us and below us, hey, you deserve this time off. And Millie, I was trying to remember the whole time when we had the Ohio luncheon, there was a lady that was working on policy for Columbus that said it should not be called parental leave. It should be called parental. Do you remember the word?
I don't.
I'm going to send it out to everyone, but it was amazing. There is the way things are said need to also be focused on, because when she switched it, and I'm going to say it was parental work rather than parental leave, that's huge, because you're eye-opening to people. Any woman on here that's had a child is not sitting at home eating bonbons with her feet up. She's healing her body. She's having emotional, nervous breakdowns daily. She's wondering what she just did to her new life, right? And she's keeping a baby healthy. So you're not at home relaxing. So I just think this was very inspiring. We can't thank you all enough for everything you shared and having the courage to make change and stand up for what is right, especially to the HR people on here. I know there's a lot of pressure from upper management to fight for their rights, but I think it's amazing for HR professionals that also focus on what is the right thing to do for the company and standing up to those in leadership that might be pressuring towards other sides. So thank you all so much. And please,
that quote.
Go ahead, Millie.
I have to do that quote for us.
Do the quote, and then we'll say goodbye.
President Barack Obama said, and this will leave you, and you should write this down and look at it every day like I do. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. So go forth, ladies and gentlemen, and make change. And thank you all so much to our speakers, to our sponsors, to our members for showing up, and more to come on network. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye all.